Hello! So, I have just done with reading the classic Philip Jose Farmer 1964 to 1973. I've got this hardcover reprinting, part of a classic series to reprint old sci-fi. So, actually, I'll start with a few words about Philip Jose Farmer, right? Because everything I've got to say about the novel basically tends to relate to the author as much, or probably even more, than the actual stories, because it's a short story collection. So he had a career that spanned years, I think more than 60 years. He had more than 50 novels written, of which I've read a few over the years, and I think over 100 short stories. I've read a few of those as well. Enormously influential. This collection has two introductions. The first is by Isaac Asimov, who Asimov talks about contemporary sci-fi, which is funny considering that this begins in 1926. I wouldn't call that contemporary anymore, that's classic sci-fi. But I guess from Isaac Asimov's point of view, it was contemporary. He gives a quick history of the development of sci-fi in America, specifically American sci-fi. And of course, the majority of American sci-fi happened in periodicals. Novels didn't exist in sci-fi until later. It was mostly short stories, novellas, serialized novels. And because they appeared in journals, basically, journals and comics, they didn't survive very well because those forms of media evaporate and disintegrate. I think I've got an old fantasy and sci-fi there disintegrating in the pile. So Asimov talks about how collections of the classic sci-fi are beginning to be made, and this is one of them. That intro, while it's quite short, I think it's only a couple of pages, but it was actually quite good. Then there's another introduction. This one is by Martin H. Greenberg. I know I've read some Greenberg, but not a lot, and he doesn't stand out to me in my mind as a writer. He starts his little section defining convention and unconventional, where unconventional is not adhering to convention, and convention is general usage or custom. He obviously admires Jose Farmer quite a bit, and he talks about how Jose Farmer was actually the beginning of where sexuality and religion themes started being entered into sci-fi. Now, I didn't know that, and it seems a bit odd because the early sci-fi which aimed at teenage boys, and of course, why would you add sex into a genre aiming at young men? Mysterious. Apparently, they were all adventure stuff and heroic themes, but less sexuality and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And Jose Farmer changed all that. His first published work was The Lovers, which was published in 1952. I have read The Lovers a long time ago. And so here's the point. However famous he is, Philip Jose Farmer has never been one of my favourite authors. I don't mind some of his novels. I've definitely read The Lovers. I've got a vague memory of it. It was about a love, sexual, romantic relationship between a man and an alien. I seem to remember that the alien was an insect-like creature. And I mean, I'm not judgy about things. As long as the insect alien was a mature, consenting adult, no problem with human and insectile relationships. Go on, good on you. I definitely read some of his Riverworlds as well. The thing about Philip Jose Farmer is that for a while there, everyone loved him and his stuff was everywhere. And teenage omnivorous reader was much more omnivorous and much less selective than I am as an adult. If it was in the English language, I would read it. If it was a Reader's Digest, I would read it. If it was a can of Vegemite sent us in a care packet from overseas, I would read that. If it was a print in English, I read it. And Jose Farmer was out there, so I read quite a bit of his. And even though fantasy and science fiction was like lifeblood to me, I read it, I didn't love it. I never sought it out. I was always very meh about Philip Jose Farmer, and rereading these couple of classic novels that I have been has been an attempt to see if I can bridge the gap between me and this famous, iconic, classic sci-fi writer. And having made it most of the way through this volume and all the way through the previous volume, I've got to say that this is an attempt that I'm very close to giving up on. Okay, so The Lovers in 1953 won Hugo because it was new to write about sex and aliens. I mean, Playboy and Penthouse, they capitalized on this trend later on. It's like a lot of the earliest stories went to those magazines, so they got over that. I guess they can thank Philip Jose Farmer. And then Greenberg goes on to give us a short biography on Farmer, studied various things, wrote a lot. He emphasizes the sexuality and reproduction obsession, the good and evil duality, and the intense interest in religious imagery and using it in science fiction. He was considered revolutionary for his era, and his stories were characterized by rapid pace, flawed individuals, which I like. I like flawed individuals. I enjoy a rapid pace, but also, and even his fan Greenberg says this, a weakness in plot. Does he ever have a weakness in plot? Always and ongoing. So in this book, the first story is The Shadow of Space, 1967. And I liked a lot about the way he visualized future technology. It's a spaceship, and it starts out, it's just left the planet of... a planet named after one of the Norse gods, I think. I really like the fact that their space cruiser is called Sleipnir, which was Odin's eight-legged horse. Most appropriate because their cruiser is actually experimental. This is the cruiser that's going to investigate whether they can safely go beyond light speed. Then it is taken over by a crazy woman who they picked up after a distress signal went through. And she takes control of the engineering room, forces them way into the outer limits of light speed, and then it pops. The cruiser pops out of the universe. And it's a great notion, and I remember this about Jose Farmer. He has great notions. So they're outside the universe, and as any physicist knows, that means that all the laws of physics no longer apply, because the laws as we understand them apply to this universe and this continuum. And once they pop outside it, they can't really predict what anything's going to happen. Oh yes, by this stage the crazy woman's walked out the airlock and is orbiting a thing that they suspect might actually be the nuclei of a molecule. The woman's frozen corpse is now 38 times larger than the cruiser. It's weird, wacky, but it's a damn good story. It's a really good story. The way that he describes tech is good. The way he describes the visualization of the thing that scenes around him is good. It's all good until toward the end, when he goes all weird about how people have an umbilical connection to the universe, and without that umbilical connection, everyone's going a bit gaga. They keep trying to get back into the universe, and then it stops. There's no ending. It just stops for no apparent reason. A whole heap of people crying and in the control room because the umbilical isn't connected to their mother galaxy or something totally unexplained in any way, and the story just stops for no reason, with no resolution, with nothing. He gave us nothing. I really resent that. I resent that in modern young adults, where the aim is to make you buy another one. I resent it more in classic science fiction, when people were actually taught to write stories properly and where there's not going to be a second one. So I'm really quite angry about that. most unsatisfactory ending to any story ever, except that one time when I was 15 and I was reading a book that I got from a second-hand store and someone had ripped out the last 10 pages. That was worse than this one. Okay, so rant over on that one. The next story in it is one which he won multiple awards for. Riders of the Purple something or other. Riders of the Purple Wage. I know that story, it's a long story. I know that he won awards for that one. I've got no idea why. I have got no idea. It's word salad. Another person who was reviewing this very, very kindly said that it's paradoxically absurd but deeply touching. It's like I need a character or a storyline or an emotion before I can get touched. I can't get touched by words vomited onto the page. So it didn't touch me. But even the people who like it admit it's a word kaleidoscope of a story and not for everyone. Not for me. Apparently it ranks in the canon as a classic short story in speculative fiction. I don't know if it's speculative fiction. I've got no idea what it's about. It starts off with, I think it's meant to be the dream of someone lying on a bed, but then there's a penis worm that just goes off the bed and goes rollicking around and looks at the canvas painting of every famous person that Jose Farmer could shove on there, and then the penis worm rolls out into the street and starts climbing some woman's leg and checking out her womb. I don't know. I've got no idea. I hope YouTube doesn't censor me that for all the P words, but this is classic science fiction. I've got no idea what it is about. It was deeply, deeply boring, and I had to resort to skim reading to get through most of it. After I'd gotten through about a third of it, apparently there's some character called Chib. I've got nothing. I gave up eventually. I skim read some of it, but it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's drivel. I mean, that's on me, not on him. Many people love it. Whatever. I have no idea. So next there's Don't Wash the Carrots. It's a short story, very short story from 1969. It's, best thing about it is that it is indeed very short. It's not sci-fi. It's, I don't know, it's not anything that I can tell. It's quirky. I guess it's quirky. There's some guy on the operating table. He's got a tumor in his brain. Only when they open it up, it's a diamond. And I don't know. I guess some people liked it. I don't even see the point. I don't see the point in reading it. It's not enjoyable. He uses words too liberally and puns and in-jokes and concepts that do nothing. They don't hang together unless maybe you can skip into Jose Farmer's brain and figure out what references he's making. I can't see how else he'd do it. I'm not poorly read. I've read a lot of things, but I've got no idea what he's on about. Apparently one of his basic larger inspirations is James Joyce, and I find myself entirely unsurprised by that. James Joyce is also not short of a word salad or two. Okay, after that we've got another short story. I made it through this one by virtue of skim reading. It's called The Jungle Rot Kid on the Nod. It's from 1968. It's a not Tarzan mockery? Satire? As not written by Edgar Rice Burroughs. It's largely incomprehensible. It seems to be some kind of rant. Again, I read it. I don't think it's science fiction. I don't think it's particularly interesting, because if you rant word vomit, then you're not actually giving the reader anything very much. I mean, some people love this, but I don't get where they're coming from. Let me read you a bit, and please, YouTube, don't censor me. It's from this book. It's a classic. It's published. It doesn't even have language warnings on it. It can't be bad, right? Okay. Along came them effing Arabs again, and Abduct Jane, gangbang her. She ain't been worth a shit since. Cost me all the jewels and golden ingot I hasted off her Upa to get rid of her. Clap, Sif, yours, crabs, Pyoria, double-barreled dysentery, busted rectum, split urethra, torn nostrils, pierced eardrums, bruised kidneys, nymphomania, old hashish habits, and things too disgusting to mention. That's one of the more comprehensible paragraphs. So I guess this guy just didn't like Tarzan or Edgar Rice Burroughs very much. I mean, I'm Team Edgar Rice Burroughs. At least he wrote a comprehensible story with a plot and used words in an English language manner so that you knew what he meant. And yeah, no. I might revisit The Lovers again one day. I might revisit some of his novels. I'm going to be damn cautious. I'm not paying a lot of money for it. I've made it through more than half of this book. It wasn't enjoyable. There's many other science fiction books out there that are enjoyable. I'm moving on to them. By all means, tell me how wrong I am, how ignorant I am, and what a marvellous, marvellous classic author Philip Jose Farmer is. But I'm sorry, drivel's drivel, however classic it is. And words need to go together in a certain structure. They teach it in primary school, actually, in English-speaking countries. Structure of sentence, so it actually has a comprehensible possibility of making sense to the listener or reader. And Jose Farmer obviously was so famous that he could get these things published when if someone else without the famous name and the famous buddies had come along and handed someone this pile of dribble, I am absolutely certain that it would have been handed back to them with a if the publisher was feeling kind, please modify so that it has an actual story, or a get the hell out and never darken our doors again. I would be publisher number 2. Just saying.